Okay, we are live.
We are.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the show. Tonight, we are the Mentionables, and we are live. We're going to be taking your questions right here in studio, or the 3 studios we're in currently. And so this show's all about what you bring to the table. So we need listeners to hop on and throw questions our way. I am going to go ahead and throw this up. That way, a reminder will be there for people as they come in to take questions. So that's what we will be doing tonight. We will see where the questions take us, and if not, we will find some kind of trouble to get in. We could always chat up the LDS Church. I know they have a live chat feature on their website. So if we really wanted to get brave, we could find us a couple missionaries to talk to.
There we go.
You brought a mascot into the studio today, Clinton?
Yeah, it's my dog Roxy. She apparently wants to be part of the broadcast tonight.
That's going to up our viewership about 20%.
Probably.
Mm-hmm.
I keep trying to push her away, but she keeps making her way back up because I guess she's curious about what's going on the screen.
Our dog always tries to hop on anytime we're on a Zoom call. The dog wants to be there for some reason.
Center of attention, huh?
Yeah, it's weird.
I feel like I'm the only one who doesn't have a dog interfering with the casts.
Can you at least keep your ears down, dog, so I can see the screen?
So tonight is kind of exciting because it is our first simulcast. So we are now broadcasting to more than one location at a time. So we may have viewers on both Facebook and on YouTube tonight. So it'll be a little bit different. So
if our listeners make comments on the video on Facebook, will it show up in the comments here?
Yep, we should get them all directly to our comment section here. So
that's handy.
Yeah, so we should be able to see questions from everywhere tonight. So if you have
just realized that I
drop
could
them
both
in.
Participate in this and also watch it and comment as a viewer.
Oh yeah, there you go.
That is
make a
technically
pseudonym.
Last time we did this live Q&A, we got some good questions. We got one about what was it? Was it the best pro-choice argument? I know there was one question that was geared very directly towards you, Clinton.
Yeah, I vaguely remember that.
Or no, is there any justifiable reason for abortion? Because
right.
Yeah, so we did that last time, and then we had some questions about Jehovah's Witnesses, which were very interesting.
Yeah, and I guess on the topic of abortion, something that's kind of newsworthy is that Judith Jarvis Thompson passed away about a week ago.
The violinist argument, right?
Yeah, she's the one who originally formulated the violinist thought experiment. She wrote an article back in 1971 or 72 called "A Defense of Abortion," in which she made the violinist thought experiment and a few other thought experiments in there, which are not as well known as the violinist. But yeah,
when was Roe versus Wade?
1973.
Okay, so this was very briefly before that.
Yeah, this was pretty soon before that, and abortion was largely illegal in the United States before that time. It was legal before the point of viability. I think it was largely actually illegal at that time because it was legal before the point of viability since the beginning of the country. But in the mid 1800s, scientists discovered that human life begins at fertilization, and so they stopped performing abortions even before I'm sorry, not viability. Quickening is when it was legal. Quickening being the point when the woman can first feel the baby moving around inside her. It was legal before the point of quickening because scientists and doctors believed that it wasn't human life before that point, but we knew for sure it was human life once the woman could feel it start moving around. So they did abortions before that point, but not after. And in the mid 1800s, the science of embryology discovered that human life actually begins at fertilization, not at quickening. So for the most part, doctors stopped performing abortions, and abortion became illegal. And then by around 1970, that's when states in the United States started to liberalize their abortion laws somewhat. And it wasn't until 1972 that lawyers in Texas wanted to find a court case that they could take before the Supreme Court to challenge the nation's laws on abortion and get them overturned. And that's how Roe v. Wade essentially came about. It was actually very dishonest on the part of the attorneys. They actually used Norma McCorvey, who was the Roe v. Wade, to get, they didn't really care about her. They just cared about getting abortion legalized in the United States. So she was basically just a pawn in their scheme. Same with Doe v. Bolton, incidentally. But yeah, so that was essentially how Roe v. Wade came about.
You know your history.
Well, my abortion history, yeah, it's part of the job. So, yeah. In fact, it's actually kind of a myth that abortion has always been legal in the United States. There's a pro-choice myth to that effect, and it's just not true. Because they say that abortion was only restricted because it was dangerous and it was for the woman's safety, not because of any sort of view of the value of the embryo or fetus. But that's just not true at all. In English common law and American common law, the fetus was protected because it was seen as human life. And you can't just kill a human being, even one that's in the womb. And so, yeah. So books like Dispelling the Myths of Abortion History by Joseph Della Penna really take that idea to task and show through a lot of citations and everything that what the actual history is. And so that's one book that I've actually read to study up on the history of abortion in our country. So as a someone who does work in bioethics, it kind of behooves me to know that.
I could see that.
Yeah, history hasn't always been my strongest subject, but in abortion specifically, I've really had to learn it.
So what we could do while we're waiting for questions to come in is we could each talk about the latest thing that we've addressed in apologetics circles or written on or talked about. Mm-hmm. So, Caleb, what have you been up to recently, apologetically?
Yeah, I've spent a great deal of time the last couple months actually going through some Bible studies, if you will, with both Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses. So a couple hours a week are taken up with that. Really doing a deep dive with them, trying to have genuine conversations with people. I don't want it to be something that's deceptive in any way. But I've developed some relationships with people. We're having genuine conversations. We're engaging over both similarities in beliefs and differences. Some of the conversations have gotten really, really deep and really gotten to addressing what are the core differences in our belief system. So, for example, with the LDS Church and Mormonism, one of the big key things it comes down to is was Joseph Smith a prophet? If he was, then, Mormonism may have some validity behind it. If he was not, or if he was a false prophet, then that certainly creates a huge problem for the whole religion. So, we've gotten down to some issues like that with the Jehovah's Witnesses. They're a little less open to looking at outside materials. So I don't suspect I'll have any of them watching this here. But we've went through a similar deep dive, and a lot of that has really gotten down to the nature of God and looking at who he was and trying to determine if there was an apostasy that started in the early church immediately after the apostles. So actually going to have a conversation with one of them tomorrow as we continue that discussion down that road. I will say, for a listener kind of tidbit, it's very intimidating to sometimes get in conversations with people, especially Jehovah's Witnesses or Mormon missionaries. They're very well trained on their beliefs and what are the apologetics kind of behind it. They're very well trained and spend a lot more time than general Christian churches do in regards to study and preparing. But it's something that I don't think we should be intimidated about. If you have any kind of background in just how to have conversations, we've mentioned it numerous times, but Greg Koukle's Tactics is a wonderful book. Even if you just look up a video on, Greg Koukle's Tactics, you're going to get a lot of information that would equip you to have a conversation with people. And you can have a productive conversation with Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses, even as someone who's not highly skilled in apologetics. Just know when you're going in that as you're going through things with them, you're going to have to put in a lot of study time and probably have to pick up a few resources to help you sort through things. But if you go in with the right mindset, you can still have a great conversation and develop great relationships with people. Just be very cautious, because remember, you are dealing with groups here that fall outside of Orthodox Christianity. So great to have the conversations with people. They're a great way to develop your apologetic skills and your conversational skills. But be ready to do some research and work on the back end of that too.
It's interesting to me whenever I hear, say, Mormon or Muslim apologists, basically apologists for any religion that's not my own, it gives you that kind of insight of what it's like to be on the outside looking in, what it must be to be a person who doesn't agree with a worldview, listening to an apologist for that worldview. And it helps me to sort of avoid the pitfalls of the bad arguments that are made. One good example that comes to my mind is, for most of my Christian life, you have this sort of apologetic that's made from the Bible using science. The Bible got this, that, and the other right that they ought not to have known at the time period, scientifically. So we discovered with science what was true about the Bible. And then I hear Muslims make the same argument from the Quran, and you start to see how that argument looks from the outside and how it sort of falls apart, because there's sort of this tendency to try and shoehorn anything that might sound remotely scientific within your holy book into science in a post facto manner. And it's not convincing, if nothing else.
No, that's an excellent point. I think it's definitely made me rethink multiple times the lines of argumentation and evidence that I'm using in things. And there's been some that I've just chucked because I've realized, what, this is really not a good argument, because you see the kind of arguments they're giving. You see the ones that hold up, you see the ones that don't. And it's helped me with those investigative skills for Orthodox Christianity as well, just to see the kind of arguments they use and be like, we're kind of doing the same thing here, and it doesn't really work in either case.
Yeah, to a degree, this is sort of Loftus's outsider test type thing, where you stand on the outside listening to another religion, making their arguments and see how ridiculous they sound, and then you're like, well, I sound just as ridiculous to others. Well, that may be true, but this is Loftus's debate tactic. I've heard him debate.
Yeah, and as
pretty much his one line of.
Well, yeah, and as has been.
It looks like he's frozen up.
Yeah, and as has been pointed out to Loftus numerous times, of course, his outsider test is based on a logical fallacy, the fallacy of of the genetic fallacy. Just because if you were born someplace, you would have more likely belonged to that religion, doesn't mean that religion, of course, is false. And the other flaw, of course, the other major flaw with his outsider test is that he doesn't put his own atheism to the outsider test.
Yeah,
he makes some excuse as to why atheism is exempt from the outsider test, when there's really no reason to think that atheism is exempt. Atheism. I think it's that whole atheism being a lack of belief kind of thing, where it's not a lack of belief; it's an actual positive belief that there is no God.
Let's see. We got you back, Joe.
Yep.
Clinton covered the flaws with John Loftus's outsider test.
Yep, a couple of the major ones that I'm familiar with. I have actually read his book, The Outsider Test for Faith, and so I have some insider knowledge of that argument.
Yeah, and as an argument, if you understand the thrust that look at how ridiculous religions look like from the outside, not in terms of evidence or argumentation, it's just ridicule. They look ridiculous, therefore they are. And there is some persuasive power to that because, Mormonism looks kind of ridiculous from the outside. Not even considering the arguments, just the model that it brings to the table looks kind of ridiculous. And, Islam's the same way. And so you understand that, Christianity looks pretty ridiculous from the outside. And I'm not arguing that it doesn't, but, on an evidential basis, Christianity holds up in a way that Mormonism and Islam don't.
Yeah, and I'll say this: as you do deeper dives into people's views, you begin to understand a lot more of the reasons they've held on to the beliefs they do. So you see those reasons why they hold on to beliefs, and you see the reasons they give for their religion being true, whether they're good or bad, is certainly something to consider. But you gain a little bit more of that understanding, which is really a huge advantage to start learning those kind of things. I think it helps conversationally. It certainly helped me biblically as well, especially with Jehovah's Witnesses. You get to do a deep dive into some of the Greek in various passages, and so it's helped me a lot in that regard of doing more study into the original languages and learning more about Greek grammar, just to look at translation differences.
Yep. So Clinton, what have you been up to recently?
Well, I've been focusing on my pro-life podcast. We've been more or less doing it on a weekly basis. We didn't do an episode last week, but we actually have a number of guests coming up to appear on our podcast. The one we're doing next week, we're going to do one tomorrow, but next week we're bringing on a guest from across the pond. Dr. Helen Watt of the Anscombe Bioethics Center is going to talk to us about the ethics of vaccines, not simply using vaccines, but if pro-life people have an obligation to abstain from using vaccines which used fetal cells in their development. We're going to talk about if pro-life people have an obligation to abstain, or if they may not have an obligation to abstain, but if it's moral for them to take it or not to take it. So that's going to be a great discussion, and I know there are a lot of people who are interested in this kind of thing, especially with the COVID vaccine, or two different COVID vaccines being announced in the past couple of weeks. One from Pfizer and the other from Moderna, I think is what they're called.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so both of those vaccines reportedly being about 95% effective, but they're mRNA vaccines, which means that they don't actually inject the disease into you, a smaller portion of the disease to build up immunity, but they actually inject something into you that actually trains your cells how to fight off the disease. But there were fetal cells that were actually used in the development this vaccine. So the discussion will be on if it's ethical for pro-life people to take the vaccine, or if we have to abstain, if we have an obligation because of the fetal cells that were used. So that's going to be a really good discussion. And we have a few more lined up as well. I haven't really been focusing much on articles that I've been writing. There are a few that I want to write up to get published in a peer review journal. I have one that's out right now for to see if it'll be accepted or rejected on ectogenesis. So I guess I could mention that, because that's when there was a friend is editing a journal on ectogenesis, which is the ethics of gestating a fetus in an artificial womb. So I submitted an article on the ethics or potential ethical problems of ectogenesis to his journal. But I haven't specifically focused much on article writing, just simply because it's kind of detached, and I find it's a lot easier to be harsh to critics writing articles than it is actually talking verbally on a podcast. So I've kind of given the article writing a little bit of a break. I do intend to get back to it, but I just don't like how easy it is to be unintentionally or even intentionally harsh toward people that I disagree with, just simply writing an article. So I've kind of been focusing more on the podcast than the articles recently, but that's really what I've been working on. And I actually have a book manuscript I'm working on too. So enough projects to keep me busy for the moment.
You want to tell us about the book manuscript?
Oh, sure. It's something that I would like to get published with a publisher. I'm not sure which publisher yet. I have some leads. Joel gave me a lead to one. My boss at LTI, Scott Glusendorf, has some ties with publishers as well. I like, so I have a few options for that. But the focus of the book is on the abortion issue. But it's first of all, it teaches pro-life people the basics of logic and how to formulate a logical argument and how to recognize bad arguments. And then the rest, the first chapter is focused primarily on that. And I use examples that hopefully, people will find interesting, not just the usual stock examples like, Socrates was a man, all men are mortal, therefore Socrates was mortal. But, I like to use more like, what's the term for it? Using more of like pop culture examples, so to hopefully make it a little bit more interesting. And so the first chapter is based on just teaching kind of the basics of logic, how to formulate a logical syllogism and recognize errors in reasoning. And then the rest of the chapters will be on the various types of logical fallacies and the specific arguments that pro-choice people make, which are logically fallacious. Yeah, that's basically the gist of the book. And, I'd like to, I'll self-publish if I can't find a publisher, because I think I have enough of a following to, self-publish and do fairly decently. But, because of number one, the credibility that having a publisher brings to you, I'd like to get a publisher for it. And number two, I've also heard that if you self-publish, it makes it a lot more difficult to find a publisher in the future. So
at that point, you're radioactive.
Yeah, so I might be kind of shooting myself in the foot if I just go the self-publishing route. So I'll exhaust all publish, all routes to a publisher before I do the self-publishing route. But I'm not opposed to self-publishing either, because there are certain advantages to self-publishing. I believe in my work enough that it's not just something I'm just publishing something to just try and make a quick buck. But I actually I believe in the work that I'm doing. I've built somewhat of an online following, and people people have actually told me that they'll buy the book, that they're interested in the book that I'm writing. So so I'm definitely not opposed to self-publishing either. I think I could probably do pretty well with it. And
if you can do pretty well, then that's how you sell yourself to a publisher. If you convince the publisher that your book's going to sell, then they'll publish it. That's their only interest, is the bottom line.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard that if you have a following online, that'll usually help convince a publisher to publish your book. So that's basically what I have going on, and I'm actually not too far from having the book finished. I've got the entire first chapter written, and I've got the basics of the other chapters written. I'm just kind of plugging in the pro-choice arguments now, and so that's basically once I finish that, I'll basically be done. So
That's cool. So, do you guys think we can tie Thanksgiving into apologetics at all?
yeah, sure.
Why
All
not?
right.
I mean, like G.K. Chesterton said, I can give thanks to someone for buying me a pair of pants, but who can I give thanks for having, to whom can I give thanks for having legs to put in those pants?
Right. And this is, we did a episode a number of years ago about Thanksgiving, a seasonal episode. And this is similar to what we talked about at that point that, there's this aspect of thankfulness that really can't be justified on the atheist worldview. And on the other hand, there are studies that I brought into the thing that show that thankfulness actually has, mental and physical health benefits, just this ability to express thanks. So I could go into the entire thing, but there's a episode in the backlog that sort of brings out the argument.
Yeah,
That's true. Is that what you've been working on, Joe?
No, the most recent thing, I made an appearance recently on another podcast called Unbelievable, where I interacted with a researcher in the area of conversion, and she did a study on atheist conversion, and in her study was very specific on atheists that were educated and intelligent might find their way into converting to Christianity. I did a similar study myself a number of years ago, but I did it as a journalist, not a scientist, and so it lacked the sophistication of hers. Mine was it wasn't a blog post, it was an article, but might as well have been a blog post. Hers was a 500-page dissertation. That's all. Yeah, I've read a bit of her dissertation, but wasn't able to get through all of it. Not through lack of interest, but for other reasons. But anyway, the reason I bring that up is because I said a few things on that show that got us some attention, and I've been writing. Well, I've written at least one article to clarify some of the things that I said that might have been found objectionable. In fact, were found objectionable by some.
By some of the listeners to Unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, one of the listeners wrote in to Unbelievable, and it just happened to be an atheist whose podcast I had appeared on in the past, and he felt that my characterization of deconversion was sort of reductionist and didn't take into account. And I was trying to, sort of track back along the things I said because I really didn't have time to get into the reasons. They brought me in as a counterpoint to her, but she was the star. They wanted her research, and they just needed another voice in the podcast to sort of sit across the table from her and say things, and that was me. But yeah, so I didn't really get into reasons for deconversion, but there are two things that they might have been referring to. The first is, we've gone over my research in this podcast or streaming, whichever one you listen to. So listeners might recall that I had characterized 5 features of what I called a modal typical church, five modes of religious practice that tended to be common to deconverts. And so I had listed those on the show, and the listener might have taken those as reasons for deconversion, which they weren't meant to be. They were, backgrounds, religious background features or artifacts that might have made a person more sensitive to a particular atheist argument. So as an example, if you're in a church that really pushes, inerrancy and infallibility and maybe things like these millennial prophecies and creationism, then you're going to be far more sensitive to arguments criticizing the Bible. if you bring out features of the Bible that, indicate that it might have been changed over time through translations, or that, there are obvious contradictions in Scripture, historical errors, you get the idea. That's going to be a more sensitive or more potent argument for a person who has that kind of religious background. Now, it isn't the reason that they deconvert. It's just what we would call in the field a establishing operation. Anyway, that was one thing. But another thing they might have been referring to was, at one point in the interview, I said that deconversion is an escape behavior. Now, I was using the terminology of my field, and so it might have come across that I was saying that people who deconvert were just trying to escape something unpleasant or get out of there. And, this is a sore topic, or, argument for deconverts, because oftentimes there's this characterization that, they only left the church because of a bad experience. And so they tend to be a little defensive about that, because they want it to be understood that they were being intellectually honest when they left. They weren't just trying to get away from a bad experience. They were truly convinced that Christianity was false. It's all well and good, but when I say that it's an escape behavior, I mean that when you behave, when you do a thing, you do so either to get something or to leave something, to get away from something. And so, let's say that I discovered or came to the conclusion that Christianity was in fact false for reasons, like there's no evidence, let's say. And I couldn't find any evidence that supported it convincingly. And so I leave it. I'm leaving it for intellectual reasons, not because I'm trying to escape something. But, from a behavioral perspective, you could say easily that there's no way you can hold two ideas that are in tension simultaneously. You could not say that Christianity is true and also false. You have to select one idea over the other. Until you make that selection, you're suspended in cognitive dissonance, which is this uncomfortable feeling you get when you entertain two contradictory ideas. So at that point, when you drop the affirmative, the affirmation version where you say X is true, and you go to the disaffirmation, X is false, then you're leaving, you're not entering. You're exiting. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. And granted, of course, listeners should know we've covered this extensively in about 5-6 hours worth of content previously. So go check out those episodes for kind of our full discussion on this.
Yeah, since that's become my niche, it might be the kind of thing that I'll end up talking about more often. Kind of like Clinton constantly going on about this pro-life stuff.
Yeah, well, you got to talk about what you know.
Right, exactly. Caleb likes to go on about cults, and you like to go on about pro-life, and I like to go on about the process of becoming an atheist.
Yeah. Yeah.
We should really bring an expert in something else on here.
No kidding.
Yeah. Well, we have some, don't we? But it's just we're just kind of like the core group that usually does the podcast.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have Tyler Vela, who's an expert in being a heretic.
Yeah. He's probably watching. He'll respond to that.
Yeah. Sorry, I was channeling Nick Peters there.
Yeah, Nick Peters, who's an expert on the virgin birth.
Virgin birth, yeah, right. Yeah,
probably some other things.
Yeah. Although I haven't seen him affirm the virgin birth today, so yeah.
Yeah.
I think he may have fallen into apostasy.
Speaking of which, hopefully here in a couple weeks, we'll have a pretty cool announcement about a potential special coming up down the road.
We're finally doing a defense of Santa Claus.
We've done that once before, right? Briefly,
I think
we
we
covered that.
discussed it.
Yeah. So,
Oh,
I
have we?
saw
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I saw it definitely with Saint Nick just because of the rumor he punched Irenaeus in the face. So
Arius, I think is who it's.
Arius, that's it. My
Yeah.
bad.
Yep,
Yeah.
no worries. Have you ever done a show on whether or not it's moral to tell your kids about Santa Claus?
I think we covered that a little bit. Maybe I don't think we went real deep on that though.
That seems to
Okay.
be your kind of field there, Caleb, because of the homeschooling thing.
Yeah. Yes.
Sort of falls into your niche.
It does.
Yeah, because I used to be, if we could just take a little bit of a tangent real quick, I used to be in the camp of, no, don't tell your kids about Santa because number one, parents shouldn't lie to their kids. And number two, Santa is a mythological character, of course, based on a real saint of the church, but he's a mythological character. And so that could complicate your children when they come to if you want them to believe in God, because they might see God as a mythological figure, so that might complicate things when you're trying to teach your kids about God. But then I read an article about Santa Claus by G.K. Chesterton that really kind of gave me pause and caused me to kind of really rethink my views on this. It's been a while since I've read the article, but it's essentially what it boils down to is that G.K. Chesterton said, I still believe in Santa Claus today. It's just he obviously doesn't believe in the fat man who lives in the at the North Pole, but there's a wonder to Christmas and to Santa Claus that was instilled in him as a kid, and he still had to this day. And so because there's more to it, and I'd have to go back and reread the article to get the full gist of it. But yeah, so yeah, I just thought his article was interesting. I'll go back and reread it and maybe touch on it sometime.
Yeah, I would say that's very similar to the approach we've taken as parents. I was from a household that was very adamant that they didn't say anything about Santa Claus because they had that same mentality. Didn't want me to think other things were a myth down the road. We take a little different approach. We've let our kids believe as they're young, but we also spend a lot of time in school studying mythologies, looking at what mythology is, looking at evidence, talking about beliefs and everything in really a wide berth. And so most of our kids, we've only got one that still kind of has this idea left behind. Two of them came along on their own, figured it out. Hey, this is a little suspicious here. What's actually going on? And most importantly, afterwards, we've had follow-up conversations to talk about it. Here's what's different. Here's why we let you believe that for a while, is because we wanted you to have the fun with it. Now you get to come and be a part of this with us. You get to stay up late and play Santa, and you get to be a part of the fun. So let's help continue to make it fun for your siblings and keep this kind of magic going for a while. Mm-hmm. So it's really a holistic approach. So I think if we had just did that and then just dropped it off without answering questions, without dealing with the differences, I mean, immediately afterwards, we sat down and had discussions about why is this different from the other things we talk about? Why did we let you believe this? And how does this apply to the other things we've taught you? And just a really loving conversation. And it's made all the difference. We haven't had any kind of, regretful thinking from them where it's like, I don't know if I trust you on these other things now. Because we spend a lot of time on looking at these things and really grounding it in reality. So,
yeah.
Here's an interesting comment here from the Mentionables. I tell my kid that Santa is like Spider-Man. We really talk about him, and he helps us remember to be good. But he isn't really going to come down the chimney.
Yeah, my kids don't believe in Santa, but they believe in Elf on the Shelf, and I'm not really sure how that works, but given the fact that I really like doing the things, I haven't said anything yet.
Yeah, and did you know that there's actually a Christmas or a Christmas song about Santa that mentions God?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which one's that?
The song "Here Comes Santa Claus" contains the line "Santa knows we're all God's children."
So it says, praise the Lord above because Santa
Right.
Claus comes tonight.
Santa Claus, yeah, right.
Oh, so yeah, it says, let's give thanks to the Lord above because
Right.
Santa Claus comes tonight.
Yeah. Yeah. So, which
There's
is
our
fitting.
music trivia for the night.
Yeah, which is fitting because Santa is based on the character of Saint Nicholas, a real life saint of the church. And I hear that the story of him punching Arius, losing his cool at Arius's heresy and punching him, is mainly apocryphal. It probably never happened, but it's something that has obviously passed down through generations. So
Now I'm going to punch you.
Right. Wow.
All right. Well,
thankfully, I'm safe in my home here in Sanger, California.
Great. Now I don't believe in Santa Claus anymore.
Just mail him a glitter
disillusionment.
bomb. Mail him a glitter bomb, and that should put y'all even.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I've never purchased one. I've thought about it, but my conscience has stopped me.
Well, this
is any porch pirates where you live.
Not that we're aware of here.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard accounts of stuff disappearing, so we always make sure to keep an eye out for deliveries.
All of my packages get delivered to somebody else's house in the first place. So,
oh, do they?
I'm sort of a porch pirate, but only because I'm reacquiring the things that belong to me anyway.
Yeah, thankfully, I think thankfully we do at least have honest neighbors, because actually I received a paycheck from an article I sold to a magazine, the Christian Research Journal, and it actually got delivered to the wrong address. And thankfully he didn't try to cash it. He brought it over and left it on my car and said, "Here, this is yours." So that was honest of him. So thankfully we at least have some honest neighbors. But yeah, we've in fact we're on that neighborhood app where you can kind of keep up with your neighbors, and there's like a message board where you can talk about the things that go on. And yeah, we've had some cases of cars being broken into recently. And yeah, we've actually on our house here have had someone sort of break in, stuck his arm through the window and grabbed some money that my dad had in his drawer. So yeah, so we've had a string of cars and homes being broken into. So what Jesus said, store up treasures in heaven, don't store up treasures on earth where thieves can break in and steal or moth can destroy. So
way to tie that back into
yeah, gotta make it apologetic related here. So yeah, something that's not exactly apologetic related that I'm kind of excited about, and I don't know if anyone else will share my excitement, but I just found out that a few CDs by Barren Cross have been remastered and released. So I'm excited about that.
All right, I'm not in the know. Who is Barren Cross?
Oh, they're a Christian metal band from the 80s.
What? And I don't know about them.
Yeah, you don't? Well, yeah, I mean, they were pretty big. They were on the record label with Rat and who else was it? Let me see if it says here. But I think Stryper was on the same record label. But there was another. Where'd the page go? Here we are. Let's see. Let's see. Yeah, they were voted number 11 from Heaven's Metal Magazine's top 100 Christian metal albums of all time. Their album Atomic Arena. Here we are. Oh yeah, they were label mates with Rat, Slayer, Poison, and Stryper. So, yeah.
Wow. Well, I've embarrassed myself tonight. So
yeah, in fact, one of the albums that was Actually, I guess I could tie this in apologetically because one of the albums that was remastered, and I'm going to be picking it up here as soon as I get paid next week. One of the albums that was remastered, I forget the name of the album, but it actually has a pro-life song on it called "Killers of the Unborn," in which they say basically to abortionists, "Knock it off, stop killing the unborn." So, yeah.
Cool. Well, I know what I'll be listening to tonight.
Yeah. So "Killers of the Unborn" by Barren Cross is that song, but I haven't heard too much from Barren Cross. I'm trying to get into listening to more of the Christian 80s metal and rock bands that I've kind of missed out on, and so Barren Cross is kind of my next project here. So
cool.
Yeah.
So have you ever heard of an artist named Ojo Taylor?
No, I haven't.
Okay, he was part of a Christian rock band. I think they were called Undercover. They were kind of a punk band.
Don't think I've heard of them, but I'm not as familiar with punk bands as I am other forms of rock. Never really got into punk much. I listened to Reliant K, which are no longer a punk band, but they started out as a punk rock band, and then the non-religious bands like Blink-182 and Green Day. But
didn't Reliant K beat the devil one time? Defeat?
What do you mean? No, I think you're thinking of Charlie Daniels.
No, the Reliant K, if I'm not mistaken, had a song that was a tribute to the greatest song in the world, and it spoke of...
No, that's Tenacious D.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, Reliant K is a Christian band. Tenacious D is definitely not.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah, no. Reliant K, yeah, they're a Christian band. I like them. I like their older material. I don't like their newer material so much. Because their older material, when they did punk rock songs, they had a wit to them that I really appreciated. Now they've kind of lost their wit, and they've actually kind of lost their energy too. So, yeah.
So
they're more of an A&R band now.
The reason I brought up Ojo Taylor and Undercover is that he was one of the profiles I did for Deconversion.
Oh, really?
Oh.
Yeah. And his path wasn't dissimilar to, oh, goodness, the guy from... I'm going to forget it completely. A more recent deconvert who was also
Hawk Nelson, right?
Hawk Nelson. Thank
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually added him on Twitter. So
yeah. So at any rate, the two of them shared a lot of
Yeah, Steingard, I think is his last name.
Steingard, right? So it seems to be that this whole touring band thing can have a particular effect upon one's...
That was my dog. Sorry, I muted so that if you want to come through the microphone.
That's all right. That. We needed sound effects, so very interesting. I did not know that either. So you guys have educated me on some music knowledge tonight. All right, so we don't have any questions coming in. If you have them,
I did have one other thing to add, but I had to go put my dog out real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just a question to Joel. Did the name Pete Stewart come up in your research?
I don't think so. That doesn't ring a bell. Hold on, I'm looking at my names right now. Nope, not on there.
Because he was a Christian musician in the 90s. One of the great Christian guitar players that have ever been. Not one of the not the greatest, and not on the level of like Glenn Kaiser or Phil Keaggy, but a really great guitarist from the 90s. And he had a band called Grandma Train, which has since reformed as a non-religious band. And he also played briefly when Michael Tate went solo and formed his Tate band. He was the guitarist for the band, and he ended up leaving the faith sometime in the 2000s, I believe it was.
Yep.
Yeah, that was Yeah, that was probably one of the biggest blows to Christian music. Like, I never really got into Hawk Nelson. I didn't really like them when they first started. So I mean, it's always a blow when a Christian deconverts. So from a perspective of we don't want people to fall away and not be saved perspective, it's bad. From a Christian music perspective, I never thought Hawk Nelson was all that great. So it wasn't that big of a blow in the context of Christian music itself. Pete Stewart was a much bigger loss than Hawk Nelson, or some of the other musicians which have deconverted. But yeah,
I wonder, I'd like to look at more of these musicians that deconverted because, it's interesting to see that kind of trend between the two that I did look at.
yeah,
See
one of
if,
the original
there's a.
yeah one of the original members of the Newsboys deconverted too. His last name is Perdicus. I want to say his first name is John, but it might not be. But Perdicus is his last name. He's another deconvert.
Yeah, and Mike Herrera from MXPX. Some of the
really?
comments I've heard from him, while it hasn't been like directly deconversion, it's been very clear that he's abandoned the religious beliefs he held in the past.
Yeah.
So.
And of course, you have worship songwriter. What's his name? It'll come to me in a minute. Michael Gungor, I think, deconverted also from the Michael Gungor band.
Oh, Gungor, yeah.
Yeah. He and his wife.
He deconverted in like 2012, and his wife, it never deconverted, but she's in sort of a limbo-ish area. She's not a Christian, and she's got some sense of spirituality, but it's not connected directly to Christianity. It's sort of this mushy, sort of liberal sense where everyone is unique and they have love or something. I don't know.
Yeah, and Derek Webb, formerly of Caven's Call, is a deconvert also.
Derek Webb.
Which is a shame too, because I was heavily into Caven's Call. They, I was never much into folk music, but they had a just a way about their songwriting, which I really appreciated. And, of course they were very Calvinistic. So I'm not sure, what the rest of the band would say about Derek Webb, considering their Calvinism, that they might think he's still, still a believer or still saved, just backslidden or something. But yeah.
Yeah. He's like many deconverts. He's kind of bitter about Calvinism. It's very odd because this is a pattern I did see in deconverts, is that they really have a bad taste in their mouth for Calvinism specifically. And he's in sort of the same camp, I suppose.
Yeah, because Caven's Call was very Calvinistic, especially in their songwriting. They had that song "Thankful," which goes, "I'm so thankful that I'm incapable of doing any good on my own." So there was very much Calvinistic.
Right. Yeah, and he was, in fact. But his pattern was a little bit different than the other, musicians that I looked at. He his had a lot more to do with he struggled a great deal in terms of relationships early on. He had an entire song about how difficult it was in the church to find and stay in a relationship. The song was titled "Table for Two," I believe. And
okay, yeah, that was one of their earlier songs.
And he was really bitter about the sort of courtship movement, a la "I Kissed Dating Goodbye," and he would get up on the stage and sort of rail against that book and that movement in general. So that was difficult. And he eventually did marry, and he married a beautiful woman who also was a Christian songwriter and singer.
Yeah, Sandra McCracken.
Right.
She was one of their co-writers, in fact.
Yeah, he was pretty open about his struggle with pornography, and then he had an affair, and it was about the time that he was going through the divorce that he also began to sort of go through the deconversion process as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, actually, the band Caveman's Call was good for finding a spouse because the other male lead singer and the female lead singer ended up getting married, Cliff and Danielle Young.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So with him, it seems like a lot of his struggles and so forth really revolved around relationships and the sort of desire to be in one. And then while in one, he had an affair and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and on the other side of the equation, there are a number of non-religious musicians that end up coming to the Lord. I just recently found out that the lead singer of Wasp is a Christian now, and Wasp has some pretty, not safe for work songs, which I've heard
I would imagine.
Which I've heard he won't perform live anymore because of his faith.
The name alone seems to have connotations that might suggest that they're not real big on religion.
Yeah. I mean, the band is called Wasp, but they have periods after each letter, WASP, indicating that perhaps it's an acronym for something. I'm not entirely sure what that would be. But
you're not familiar with the acronym WASP?
I am not.
Me neither.
Okay, WASP stands for White Anglo-Saxon Protestant, and it's sort of this it's kind of the early shunting of a particular subset of the population into a category. It's kind of like being a white cisgender male now. Back in the day, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, WASP, was sort of a derogatory term for the typical white guy.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, the guys, or at least one of the guys, I don't know if the rest of the band, but the lead singer of Extreme, Gary Cherone, is a Christian, and pro-life also, which is cool. So, yeah, we get it in both directions.
So speaking of deconversion, I know you've talked a little bit about leftward drift in the past, but with that, do you see the other big area I've been studying recently is progressive Christianity? So, did you see, or were a lot of the people, because I've seen, in addition to these full deconverts, I've seen some people that seem to have just deconverted to a progressive Christianity, if you will. I know we may have touched on this some in the past, but
yeah. So it's sort of a logical flow whenever you run into issues around Christianity. Those issues can be resolved fairly easily by taking a step to the left. So, earlier we talked about issues surrounding inerrancy in the Bible. If you're struggling with inerrancy, you can maintain your Christianity by taking a step to the left and dropping the inerrancy doctrine, and taking on more of a a criticism. What is it called?
Non-inerrant.
Higher criticism. Yeah, a higher criticism view of the text. And I forget what the term was for this theory of the Old Testament, where you had two documents that were integrated during the Babylonian captivity. And one was the Yahweh
documentary hypothesis.
Yes, thank you. The documentary hypothesis, and that kind of thing would do away with struggles about the text in the Old Testament. And then in the New Testament, you could kind of go the Bart Ehrman route, sans atheism. But the idea that you have some documents thrown together and that Jesus made a sacrifice is sort of an example for us of giving ourselves. And a lot of those kinds of objections can be dealt with by taking a step to the left. Now that's doctrinal. And then you've got social. It's objectionable a great deal for us to, for a person to be to be Christian and also be progressive. It seems like you have to choose one or the other. And if you happen to be the sort of person that sympathizes with progressive ideals, then you can maintain your Christianity by shuffling to the left. And so, and then when you shuffle to the left, more objections come up because as you take a step to the left on, um, I don't know, a very good example that I gave, I believe, when we were talking about it in the podcast is Ryan Bell, not to be confused with Rob Bell. Ryan Bell is the Year Without God guy, and he started out in, Caleb, you described the Seventh-day Adventist as sort of cultish to a degree.
That's a hard one. I would say they are mostly orthodox. They hold to a couple unconventional kind of ideas that would certainly be something typical you would see in a cultish church, but I don't know that I would classify them as a cult fully.
All right. Well, I apologize if I've offended any viewers or listeners that are Seventh-day Adventists. I don't know much about that.
And
But
if
I
I
do
said
know
it, I may
that
have
based
very
on
well
what he
said
said,
something different in the past. So if I did, my view has changed somewhat as I've studied them more.
okay. So one of the things I do know based on what Ryan Bell said is that they have certain specific ideas about things like the way women should dress and, ideas about the use of makeup and use of alcohol and smoking. And, so it's very restrictive in terms of vices, I suppose. And so when he went to a church and he found women wearing makeup and guys taking smoke breaks and things like that, he suddenly had this problem. He could either enforce the church's doctrines or he could sort of relax the doctrines a bit and allow for these things. And so he relaxed. And as soon as he did that, other problems arose, like, for instance, say, the role of women in the church. If you're going to be a little more permissive, then this becomes kind of a difficulty if your particular dogmas say that women can't, say, for instance, preach. And so you have to relax on that and take a step to the left. And as soon as you do that, you're going to run into issues with, say, gay marriage, for instance. And so, in order to deal with that and solve that issue, you take a step to the left. And as you continue to do that and become more progressive, things about Christianity become more and more objectionable. And so, what you find, and this is a common theme, this is what I've run into in most of when I'm a large majority, let's say, of the deconversion stories that I've read, is that the person kind of keeps taking that step to the left in order to deal with these problems that arise. And eventually they get to the point where they've stepped so far left that they're humanists. And what need do you have of God if you're a humanist? And so they just sort of stop being religious as a result.
Which makes sense. Alicia Childers, in her recent book, Another Gospel, talks heavily about progressive Christianity and states that, if she had deconverted, or if she were to deconvert, she'd go all the way to atheism rather than accepting something such as progressive Christianity. But I think from the process you've described, it's usually much more gradual. It's not all at once, all of a sudden, I'm all over here and have abandoned everything. Like you said, step to the left, step to the left, step to the left. And, I suspect if we saw the data as well, we would see that a lot of the deconverts probably do come from a progressive environment, because once you progress so much, then, you really see that there's not a whole lot of need for the beliefs you have left. And I think that's what I see in progressive Christianity is it's kind of what's the best way to put it? A spiritual belief system. It's one that fits the kind of modern statement of, well, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual. And progressive Christianity is very much that. You might as well take the Christianity off of it and just call it progressive, because it's abandoned most of the core doctrines that matter to Christians. They're all just hypothetical or mythological, or just a stepping stone to accepting some other progressive or liberal kind of take on things.
Now, one of the hallmarks of progressivism is that they do have a very strong moral sense. There are definitely things that are right and wrong, and the stuff that's wrong is really wrong. So in terms of conviction, they have very strong convictions about things. They're very eager and ready to criticize those things with which they disagree. And being Christian, having that religious aspect, allows them that grounding that you would need in order to affirm and deny certain concepts. The value of individual freedom to choose one's lifestyle, as an example. And, to have a God that backs that gives you that moral authority. So I think that is one part of being a progressive Christian, is that unlike an atheist humanist, which doesn't have as strong a moral claim, you have a very strong moral claim if you're a progressive Christian, because you can ground that in God. And then God becomes sort of a locus of love, if you will, love being this affirmation of one's freedom to choose and be who they want to be without any sort of outside interference. So.
Yeah, and one of the issues with that maybe people come to see is the philosophical problems it runs into eventually, because when you go down that road, your grounding becomes not in a theistic God, but in a panentheistic God. So a God that is in and part of everything. So one of the problems with that is then you very directly have God is in everything. That means he's part of evil as well, and that evil is just as much grounded in God's nature as good is. So that's a bit of a problem. But yes, I would agree with that.
Well, that's the difficulty for progressive Christians, I suspect, is that, you can't really have sin in progressive Christianity, because sin would sort of say that you as a human being can do something that violates that your freedom to choose and to act could possibly be such that you violate some higher law, but that would mean that there's a higher law that you're held to, versus what they would affirm is sort of this absolute libertarian freedom to be whoever you want to be and do whatever you want to do. But then again, they would affirm evil, because the violation of someone else's libertarian freedom to do whatever they want to do is definitely evil.
Yeah. Just the whole conversation made me think about diving in on that a little bit. So I'm not seeing any questions come in. So I've got an idea for one final kind of segment before we end this up. You're always the one coming up with games, Joel. So I decided it was my turn to come up with a game. So you can be in the hot seat this time. So we're going to play a game. And this one's going to be a little bit different than our games in the past. So it's going to be nice and educational for people as well.
Uh-huh.
I haven't come up with a name for this game yet. So if somebody has an idea, throw it in the comments. I'd love to hear what people have to say. But here's the idea behind this game. I am going to throw up a meme on the screen. You will see this meme, and you will have about 5 seconds to process it. And after that, you are going to have to give a 30-second response to this meme. Very strictly timed. 30-second response to this meme. And we'll see how this goes. I don't know how I determine a winner. If listeners want to vote on who wins each one, that will help. That will be great. Also, I don't have any way to cover it up for you guys. So somebody's going to have the advantage. So we'll go back and forth. So one person will have the other person's time to process, and then next round they'll be in the hot seat for going first.
Okay.
So let's do that. And we will do a few memes. We will see how this goes and go from there. Sound like a plan?
Sure. Do you want to flip a coin to see who goes first?
Yeah. Do you have a coin?
Well, I do. Although I'm not the greatest at flipping coins, but we can see how it goes. See if I... Okay, well, I grabbed a nickel. That's good enough.
All right. Joel,
Okay.
You're going to have to call it.
Yeah, we can have Joel call it in the air. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and flip it onto this board here. Okay, the coin has been flipped. I have it right here. Joel, call it.
Tails.
It is... See if I can find the camera here. Looks like heads.
Kinda, yeah.
Yeah, okay, heads.
Yep, heads.
There we
All
go.
right. Joel, do you want to defer or do you want to go ahead and take the first one?
Joel lost the coin cost. The coin cost didn't. Coin cost, didn't he?
This is like football rules. He gets.
What am I trying to say? Coin toss.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
He lost. So you get to pick, Clinton. Sorry about that.
That's
You
right.
get to pick. Do you want to defer or go first?
I'll go ahead and defer to Joel. I'll receive in the second half.
All right. Sounds good. All right. I'm going to throw up our first meme. I will give you guys about 5 seconds to process. And then I will say go, and you will have 30 seconds, Joel. Okay. Yep. All right. So here is our first meme. I'll read this for the listeners. You see that man over there, Timmy? This is Jesus saying this. Yes, Jesus, I see him. Jesus replies, that's the man that murdered you and your family while you were sleeping. He repented and asked for forgiveness. Now he's here in paradise with us. Go say hello. All right, Joel, go.
Okay, so it's interesting to me that when somebody brings up this objection, and yet they will immediately object to hell as a concept. So it seems like there's, do we affirm hell as a place of judgment for people who deserve it, or do we say nobody deserves hell? And then secondly, people who have this tend to be the kind of people who are against prison and are, against the death penalty.
Time's up.
So there's this.
I'll let you finish the thought.
That's strict.
So it seems as if these are the kinds of people who believe in sort of redemption, and the kinds of things that you would do in prison to reform a person, but they would not allow for that in a cosmic sense.
Okay. Clinton, go.
Well, a meme like this is very emotionally misleading. What the Christian concept of heaven actually is that anybody who repents can go to heaven, but the repentance must be genuine and it must affect a legitimate change in a person's life. So if a person committed a murder or some heinous crime but has changed and now is living, has repented seriously and it is no longer has any of those desires, decides to live a life for Christ, then they can go to heaven.
Okay.
That's a lot harder than it looks, because that's not all I wanted to say, because that's not, there's more I need to add to that. So.
Yeah, and I'm sure we've covered a lot of this in the past. So I want to encourage listeners in doing this. 30 seconds is to give a quick response, just to give people an idea that there are quick answers to these things that people are familiar with, but they sometimes are more advanced ideas that do take a little fleshing out. So in doing this, I don't want to slight the listeners anyway. But
right, these should not be seen as the answers we would give if we have 2 hours to formulate a response.
Right, exactly. The idea, though, is quick responses, and yeah, you get it. Okay, so next one may be a little bit easier here. This time you get to go first, Clinton.
Yeah, you started us off with a hard one.
Yeah, so I'll give you about 5 seconds on this one.
Okay.
This one says, how Christians think reality works. It shows an old man with a beard standing on top of the earth, playing with tanks and planes and toy soldiers. All right, Clinton, go.
Okay, well, there is a sense in which God works in reality. I don't find that particularly controversial, especially if God exists, then it makes sense that he would want to affect the creation that he's made. But God has also given us free will, and so, the evil things that men do aren't necessarily controlled by God. The weather patterns aren't necessarily controlled by God, even though they were set in motion by God, because God did create a universe that has natural laws and works by those natural laws. So, okay, in a broad sense, God is making these things happen, but in a more narrow sense, he has put natural laws into effect, which allows the universe to function in a certain way.
All right. And Joe, go.
Yeah, that's not even remotely how I think Christianity works.
Okay.
All right, with 20 seconds to spare.
But the meme is how Christians think reality works, not Christianity works.
Sorry, reality. That's not even remotely how I think reality works.
I'm trying to catch Joel on a technicality here.
Okay. I think Joel has caught on to the game now. So,
right.
All right.
Well, this is a straw man, and the first rule of straw man is not to buy into the premise. And I don't buy into the premise.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Joel's back up first again, right? Let me see what's up next here. Here we go. All right. I'll give you about 5 seconds as I describe for any future audio listeners what this is. All right. This meme says, man created God in his image. Intolerant, sexist, homophobic, and violent. And go.
Okay. So the premise is that God is a creation of man to enforce those things which men are anyway. And so where are you getting that image of God? Where are you getting that picture of God?
All right. More time to spare there, Joel. And that is time. All right, Clinton, go.
Well, this meme has it exactly backwards. First of all, it begs the question because it assumes that the things Christianity teaches are intolerant, sexist, homophobic, and violent. But the reality is Christianity has been a great force for good. And so if there is a God, then things like homosexuality being a sin and other things Christianity teaches would not actually be wrong. It would be the atheist who's wrong. But again, it would take much more time than I have here to talk about whether or not the things Christianity teaches are actually intolerant, sexist, etc. I can't do this in 30 seconds.
It is challenging. So let me see.
Yeah, that last meme was a Greg Tokol. How did you come to that conclusion?
Right. Yeah.
Because I would need to know where they're getting their concept of God.
Yeah, because if God exists, then he has the right to tell us right from wrong. And if that means homosexuality is a sin, well, that's not homophobic. That's just the way things are, And so this is assuming that the atheist's morality is absolutely correct, which, they have even less confidence than we do about that. So,
Yeah. And it's also entirely possible that you got your idea of who God is from a person who indeed did reflect their own personality in the God that they believed in. But that doesn't mean that God as a actual being was created by people who misconceive him.
well, yeah, and the thing about the Christian God is it would have been impossible for someone to create God, to create the Christian God out of his own imagination. Number one, we believe in a God who's a Trinity, who's three persons in one essence, which is difficult even for Christians to understand. There's no way someone would have just made that up out of thin air. But also, I could go ahead and plug Tom Gilson's recent book, "Too Good to Be False," which essentially states that Jesus, Jesus can't be a fictional character because no one would have been able to create a character who is as morally perfect as Jesus is, and yet still such a compelling historical figure to read about. So the Christian God is not a God that anyone could have just invented out of whole cloth.
Have you ever read any of Nina Karen Monson's work?
No, I haven't.
So she's a Swedish philosopher. I think she's Swedish. I might be wrong about that. But she was, an atheist philosopher. And she eventually came up with a philosophy about sort of this ideal man, if you took all of the good things, aspects of humanity, and were to condense them into a single person, what would that person look like? And then she was surprised to find that the person that she was describing was Jesus of the Bible.
Hmm.
And that's how she
interesting.
came to be a
Yeah.
Christian.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to read about the conversions of some people and what actually ends up bringing them to Christ.
All right, so I've got a couple here. We're going to skip this one, but I have to throw it up anyway for a second.
Oh.
So this one has Jesus holding a T-Rex saying, "I'm sorry, Rex. The ark is full."
Yeah, he's that's one that Ken Ham would probably share around.
Yeah, he would. He
Yeah,
might.
I actually have a book by I believe it's by Ken Ham uh, about his unique interpretation of the dinosaurs and how they died off. Because I used to be a young Earth creationist, and I would consume the material from Answers in Genesis, and I no longer do, but I still have that book.
I've been to more than one of their conferences.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've always wanted to.
Yeah, when I was a kid.
Okay, yeah, I've always wanted to visit their Ark encounter too. Not because I believe in young Earth creationism any longer, but I've heard that it's pretty well built.
Yeah, I mean, any attraction like that has
we going to
has a
respond to
certain
that
draw.
meme, or?
No, I'm not letting y'all respond to that one. Who goes first this time? It's
that would be
Clinton,
me.
right? Okay.
Yep.
Well, I'm going to wait and save this one here, Joel. So because I want him to have less time on this one.
Okay.
It's up his alley, so I want to give him too much time on this one. So we're gonna do this one first, and we're gonna start with this one. So you'll have about 5 seconds on this one.
Okay, and you'll be reading it again for the listeners.
Yep. So this one says at the top, all knowing.
Oh, this is hipster Jesus.
Yes, hipster God. And then down below it says makes you smear blood on your door so that he doesn't accidentally kill your family. All right, and go.
Okay. Yeah, this one, this one is kind of a tough one because, well, I mean, obviously this is an allusion to to the angel of death from the book of I believe it's Exodus, where God wants Pharaoh to let his people go, and he's going to kill the firstborn of every Egyptian family. I don't know. I'd have to take more than 30 seconds to think about how to respond to this one.
That's Tom. You did good on
Okay.
time that time.
I did great
That's
on
a win.
time, but
That's
not
a
very
win.
good on content though.
All right. Well, we can't give Joel too much time to think about this. Go.
Oh, true. Okay.
All right. So, the whole angel of death thing had nothing to do with identifying the Jews. It had to do with identifying the people who would be willing to go through that ritual. This is a period of time where God was Jehovah was kind of a new thing to these individuals who'd grown up in a pagan culture over the last 300 years. And so it was this idea of, are you going to trust in this God that is the God of Abraham? And
Time.
those who did.
All right. All right. Both of you are getting good on time. I like this.
Thanks. Even if I have no real answer. Yeah, no, actually, because that one actually kind of took me by surprise, because that's actually something I hadn't really thought about before. So, I thought Joel's response to that was a good one, because, following up on it, God was about to, take the Jews, on the wilderness for 40 years, I think it was. And I can see that being kind of a sign that each Jew who would do that would be willing to follow God through the wilderness, which is a lot more difficult than actually just putting some lamb's blood over your doorpost. That's relatively easy by comparison. And so I thought that was a good answer.
Yeah,
So
go ahead, Joe.
So much of what is in Exodus is much better understood if you realize that Moses was coming to a people that had no scriptures. At best, they had tradition, and they had grown up for the last 100 or so years, their generations had been in a culture which was heavily paganistic, believing in multiple gods. And if they knew anything about Jehovah or Yahweh, they did so through whatever was being passed down traditionally from father to son. So as a result, you have to understand the story in that context, because you notice the first thing Moses said to the angel of God in the burning bush was, well, what is, who should I say sent me? Which is tantamount to saying, which God should I say is sending me? Because there are many gods. And God's response is, I am, and that response is well understood in a context where they believed in many gods. And, then in the 10 Commandments, the first 2 commandments were against the worship of other gods. And so, understood in that sense, the ritual makes a lot of sense. Are you willing to trust into this God?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think a lot of times we do tend to forget that the stories we read in the Bible were about people who didn't yet have the scriptures, and so that can definitely cause us to misinterpret a lot of passages if we forget that little detail.
So Moses was coming in and preaching a new God, or at least a God that was largely forgotten.
Yeah.
And side note, I think you raised an important point, Clinton. These things can take people off guard, especially when you're given such a short time frame to respond. That's exactly what a meme's designed to do. We've talked about this a lot before, but it's designed to create humor by taking you off guard and subverting your expectations. So, while it shouldn't lead to, deeper questioning necessarily, most of these, because they really are just meant to subvert your expectations.
Yeah, and I have a good grounding in scripture and in philosophy and theology. So when I encounter something like that, I don't immediately think, oh, there must not be an answer, so I'm going to leave Christianity behind, I'm going to think, well, there's probably a good answer, especially based on some of the other things I know. Like, I've heard someone ask, if God is all knowing, then why did he ask in the garden where Adam was after they eaten the forbidden fruit? So, and again, it's not that God didn't know where Adam was. But there was a reason that God was calling out to Adam, asking where he was. And so I figured, well, okay, yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's a good reason for it, that I hadn't considered before. And so that's why, we should be seekers and not just assume, we know everything already. And when we come to something we can't answer, don't just assume that there's no answer for it out there, but actually, search around for it. So.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Joel's up again on this one. So again, I'll give about 5 seconds as I read things, and then you'll have to respond. So here we go. All right. So this one has a man sitting in a bubble. Yes. Yes.
My connection is pretty terrible right now, so
oh no,
I can't even see what's up on the screen. So
okay, well, I guess
I'm going to try and switch to a different internet connection.
Okay, we'll give him a second then.
Okay. Yeah, so I was going to say, because you're going to describe it anyway, so.
Yeah.
So.
We'll see if it gets switched around. So what do you think of this game so far?
Yeah, well, I mean, I like it. Yeah, you're putting us on the hot seat, and I think it does a good job of showing that, while you can take 15 seconds to tear down an idea, it takes a lot longer than that to defend it. And I think this is a good exercise to show that, because someone can say, you're begging the question by saying that God has existed forever, because the universe can just be the thing that has existed forever. And so, that's a 15-second criticism of Christianity, but it's going to take quite a bit longer to explain why we know the universe isn't the one that's existing, or why, even if it was, it still would require God to begin the chain, and things like that. It takes a lot longer to respond to these, and I think that this game does a good job of showing that, because really, if I only have 30 seconds to give an answer to a question, it's like, that's not nearly enough time. I'm sorry, I'm not going to sit there and try to give you theological or philosophical answers in just a span of half a minute. We need time to sit down and discuss these things.
Much better.
Excellent. Yeah, you can throw out a counter idea, but to really break it down, it does take a lot longer on most of these.
Yeah, it's like they say that a lie can get all the way around the world while the truth is still putting its pants on.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I missed it.
Oh, we were just having a discussion. So,
yeah.
All right, you ready for this, Joel?
I am ready for this.
Okay. This one has a man sitting in a bubble, the Christian bubble. And it says, one fact too many, and you risk popping it. All right, go.
All right, I agree with this. The Christian bubble is a dangerous thing, and I would advocate for a church environment that allows for disagreement and discussion, because truth, bad ideas die in the light, and truth prospers in the light.
All right, with 8 seconds to spare. All right, Clinton, go.
I would just turn this around on the atheist. C.S. Lewis wrote that you can never be too careful of what you read as an atheist. I would say that it's the atheist, not the Christian, who is in danger of losing their worldview if they see too many facts and the wrong kinds of facts.
Ooh, even more time to spare. Nice job, guys. Those were good, quick responses. I like that.
Well, yeah, I don't disagree with the meme necessarily, because it fits into my deconversion research, that this isolationism, this tendency to withdraw and kind of keep to your own community without engaging the outside world, is the type of thing that tends to lead to deconversion once you step out of that bubble and are exposed to ideas that you have not had firsthand exposure to.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, having that extra bit of time where Joel was talking helped because I was
All
able
right.
to formulate a short response in that window.
Yeah, that extra 30 seconds goes a long way.
Yeah, you did manage to find a meme that stumped me, though. I don't see those very often because usually they're just the same old tired atheist talking points. But this was one that I actually hadn't seen before. So, yeah.
Cool. All right, here comes another one. You're up first,
So that'd be
Clinton.
me. Yep. Okay.
Yep. Here we go. All right. This one says, if you can give me one good reason why we need a magical Sky Daddy, that'd be great.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And go.
Okay, well, I don't believe in a magical Sky Daddy, so I'll be right there with you, asking for a good reason why we should believe in a magical Sky Daddy. We believe in God, who is the grounding of all that exists, and we have good reasons, good philosophical and theological reasons for believing in that kind of God.
All right, 10 seconds to spare. And Joe, go.
okay. So, I mean, it's a mischaracterization of God, intentionally so. And the question is an illegitimate one because it gives the impression that, I might need him, I might not. And my decision to need him is what indicates his reality to me. But if I can't prove that you need him, then you don't need him, or then he doesn't exist, I suppose. So it's a bad question.
All right, and time. I give you guys credit. I was pretty sure y'all were gonna run over about every time, but y'all are getting the idea here. I like it.
Yeah, it becomes a little bit easier to formulate a quick response the more we do it. So but obviously that's not the end of the story. We want a lot more time to expound it. But if we just have 30 seconds to give a reply, it starts to get a little bit easier as the more you do it. So that's why we kind of did it there at the end, I think.
Okay, and we are going to do. Let me see here. All right, we are going to do two more.
Okay.
And that should put us ending right. And
yeah, we need to come up with a name for this game too.
Yeah, we do, and a scoring system.
Yeah,
but it's a good start. All right.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, we could penalize on time.
Start it off with.
Yeah, exactly. And we could penalize people on time, shorter responses, get bonuses.
Right.
Yeah, we should call it. What do you mean?
There we go. Yeah,
I don't know if we'll get hit with a copyright infringement for that.
Then we'd have to ask John McRae to come on our podcast and at least join us for one of those games.
Could be a good reason to have a guest.
That could be, yeah, and also, for if you want to get bonuses based on time, we could do like an extra point for each 5 seconds left on the clock or something.
Lightning round.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, Joel, this one is for you. This one says, some people are stupid and some people are religious. I can't really tell the difference. Go.
All right, that one's completely on you, man. You're the one who can't tell the difference. This meme intends to make me defend that I'm not stupid because I'm religious. I don't see my need to defend that.
All right, 10 seconds to spare. And Clinton, go.
Yeah, well, there are stupid people who are religious, and there are very smart people who are religious. There are scientists and philosophers who are religious, and the same with atheists. There are stupid and really smart people who are atheists. Being religious doesn't make you stupid. If a religious person is stupid, there's something underlying that issue. But there are a lot of really good reasons to be religious, especially Christian.
All right, 6 seconds to spare. All right, and we're going to do one more. This one will start off with Clinton, so everybody's gotten an even number of starts here. I don't know if I can give y'all that one. That one's really more of a 10-minute question. Okay, here we go. This one has a couple children on it, and it says, "We are all born atheist until someone starts telling us lies." Go, Clinton.
That's only partially true. We're all born atheists because we're all born without rational faculties. But when we actually do get our rational faculties, we start being able to understand the world better. And everyone has what John Calvin called or I think it was Calvin called it the sensus divinitatis, or the sense of the divine. Whereas we all intuitively know, even as babies, we still have an intuitive knowledge. That all
And time.
effects have causes and things like that. A
Okay.
little low over that time. Yeah.
Just a little bit.
See,
And
the
Joe.
game. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Go.
All right. So it really depends on what you mean by atheist. It is well studied that as early as we are able to measure, we can tell that individuals, young children, toddlers, have the sense of an unseen agency, that is an intelligence existing outside of their sight, and they act accordingly. They also have the idea that there is design to the world, that everything exists for a reason and has
And
a
time.
purpose.
All right.
Yeah, so this game is all about trying to figure out what you should say and what you should leave out.
Yeah, very, very much so. Or spot the logical fallacy, even in some of these. So there's not much more you can do with 30 seconds.
Yeah,
but
and I kind of feel like it would be cheating just to say with all of them, well, I would turn it around on the atheist, and so I want to give a little more meat to my responses. So yeah.
No, I think you guys did good. I was quite impressed. I did not know how this was going to go, if it was going to be a raging dumpster fire of what not to do on a live stream. But you guys did a good job. I like it.
Thank
You
you.
gave complimentary responses many times, and you showed that some of these can have a quick response that handles it just as well as a long one. And if not, it's not something people should give too much credence to, even if they run into some of these and it causes doubts.
Right.
I feel like I might have had an advantage only because I run a Facebook group that deals specifically with this kind of memes. And so I see these all day, every day. And I started the Facebook group as complimentary to the Christian Apologetics Alliance, because on their group, they don't allow memes. And it was a thing that people wanted to discuss a great deal. So I started it and invited people to come there. And now it's got, I don't know, upwards of 1,000 members.
Oh, well,
it's a very active group.
Well, I have a bit of an advantage on love song, worship songs, so I'm okay playing a game where I start off at a disadvantage. So yeah.
All right, fair enough. Well, that was fun. It was different.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll bring that one back down the road.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
That's about all I've got for tonight. So
and it's running up against midnight where I'm at. So
yeah, me too. So Joel, where can people find more of you?
All right, so you can go to joelfurchess.com. That's pretty simple. I recommend following my Twitter feed at Sides Switching for my research. And then I also post a great deal to the Switching Sides Facebook group if you'd like to join that.
All right, excellent. Clinton.
Yeah, well, you can find me on Facebook and MeWe by just searching my name. You can find me on Twitter at Clinton_Wilcox, and you can find me on Parler. Pro-Life Philosophy is my handle there. You can also find my blog articles on the Life Training Institute blog and the Secular Pro-Life blog. And you can also find my podcast. It's called Pro-Life Thinking. You can find it on iTunes, or you can go to blogtalkradio.com/prolifethinking. And you can also find us on YouTube. My podcast trains people how to defend the pro-life view, how to defend the pro-life position effectively and persuasively. And so there is content, there's cross content. The videos we produce, I extract the audio, put it on the audio-only podcast. But there are podcast episodes that are exclusive to the audio-only podcast, and I'm going to be creating training videos which are exclusive to the YouTube channel. So if you're interested in pro-life apologetics and want to get the most out of pro-life thinking, it would behoove you to listen to our audio only podcast and to watch our videos. You can find us at Pro-Life Thinking, and feel free to subscribe. You'll get to you'll get notifications whenever we're about to go live, and you can go listen in or leave comments or whatever. We'll read comments on the broadcast as we go. So
Okay. And of course, the only other place aside from here people are probably going to find me is over at Question Christianity on YouTube or Facebook. So check that out if you enjoy discussion style apologetic shows.
Whatever happened to Subjected to Truth?
It's still out there. That was my blog well before all this, but Question Christianity was just a better name for things. So kind of moved on with that name. So it's still out there if I feel like writing, but Question Christianity is just a better name. So you find a better name, you ditch the old one.
Right. Yeah, I think it's a good name.
So also, you're already here watching this on Facebook or YouTube. So subscribe, hit the like button, give us comments. You hated the meme game, you liked the meme game, whatever the case may be, give us some feedback. We'd love to hear from you. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time we are live or post a video or any of that. But we love interaction, so the more the merrier. All right. Good night, everybody.